Okay. Are you able to see now?
Yes, yes, it's starting up.
Okay. Yeah, so can I start now?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good afternoon, all. The paper is titled A People's History of State, Caste Struggle and State Building in India. There is one question which is not usually taken up in anti-caste politics, that is the question of the state. Contrary to the practice of anti-caste politics, where the question of state always occupies a central place, I would argue that this omission happens because of the habits of not seeing the state and the non-recognition of state building by anti-caste movements. Also, there are reasons like, this charge of every social scientist would fear, charge of state centricism. Nobody wants to be accused of, having state centricism or using a statist lens or seeing like a state. These are not honorable things for us. So therefore, it's very likely that a lot of people do not see state where they should. Now, on the contrary, I argue that anti-caste movements are state-building social movements. Why they are state-building movements? Because in the anti-caste politics, there are both the state is produced as both intended and unintended consequences. Now, what is the intended consequence? The victims of the caste system, for them, state is a life necessity to protect their life, to become citizens, to be treated as human beings. Is a life necessity of state. So, state is one of the essential things, necessary things for life itself. If you are a victim of the caste system. Also, there are various unintended consequences. Since the anti-caste movements are oriented towards the making of state, it has certain unintended consequences on the entire polity. If the anti-caste movements are building state, then one of the primary questions that we should ask is, what kind of state is it that they seek to build? And also the opposite of that, what is the upper casteist conception of state? Now, basically, I will first start with the upper casteist conception of state. For upper castes, the state is an instrument that allows for upper caste monopoly over all that matters, whether it is property or of violence, or resources, or right to religion, etc. So, in that sense, that is not a state actually, because to be a state, you have to the political authority has to be above all. So, in that sense, the upper caste conception of the state is actually not a state. Now, I would argue that, on the other hand, the anti-caste politics prefigures a shepherd state, the state which is like a shepherd, in the sense of being a caring state. Now, that goes in parallel with the Engels' conception of non-state. Basically, he argued that at some point of time, once the means of production is socialized, the state would wither away. That means the state becomes a non-state in the sense it will be reduced into a mere administrative apparatus. That means it does not mean that the state completely goes away, but the repressive part, the repressive machinery of the state will go away. So what would remain is only a simple administrative apparatus of the state. So when Engels said the withering away of the state, he did not say the entire state withers away, but the particular machineries, the repressive machineries would wither away. But therefore, he calls it a de facto non-state. So the argument here is that anti-caste politics is about the prefigurative construction of a administrative apparatus of the future non-state. That means a state that is a caring state rather than a repressing state. So, in the heart of anti-caste politics, there is a prefigurative imagination of this state. Therefore, anti-caste politics as a prefigurative politics of a shepherd state, which is characterized by what Foucault termed as pastoral power. Pastoral power, Foucault argues that the state in the Judeo-Christian civilization is imagined as a shepherd, the one which is caring, enumerating, looking after the flock, etc. So, and which he considers as a negative thing, which I don't, especially in the context of India. Now, the study methodology, the study combines archival research. I went through the entire archives of legislative archives of Travancore and Kerala state. We had a multiple legislative assembly, and it is from a historical sociological perspective also combined with ethnographic field work. The study is situated in the state theory, right? So it primarily addresses with some of the questions in state theory and attempts to construct a political theory of the Engelsian non-state while critically engaging with Althusser, Pulanza, Miliband, along with various conceptions of Indian state and state building in India. And this is based on, primarily based on my PhD dissertation and also the ethnographic fieldwork I carried out in the Kutinadu region between 2012 and 2018. And the paper would examine how state building strategies became the raison d'etre of anti-caste movements and continue to animate the struggles for annihilation of caste. So the primary purpose of to put it simply, the anti-caste movements want to civilize the state. There is, I would argue, there is a strong state building impetus at the heart of anti-caste movements, and it is primarily aimed at putting the upper castes to their place, to make them more human beings. So in Kerala, there was even a movement which said that Namboodiripad Manishanakku, that means making Brahmins humans. So why putting upper castes to their place matters? Because they claim that they are not really humans, they are gods. They are walking gods on earth. And in fact, all the colonial accounts of Brahmins in colonial Kerala exactly said that they claimed they were treated like non-humans or above humans, Superman, like the way Nietzsche argued. So in order to do that, the anti-caste movements had to strengthen the state to make it a real sovereign with a monopoly over means of violence and collective welfare. So that means the first thing they had to do is they had to universalize the state, making it a state for all, not just for the upper castes to carry out the task permitted by the upper caste scriptures, but it is to make it for all and a state above all. Now, civilizing the state, limiting the repressive tendencies of the upper caste state and productively constructing it as an instrument of pastoral power. When anti-caste politics talk of, that is why you can clearly see one evident expression of this. When anti-caste politics talk of Indian constitution or the Indian state, that politics mainly talk about the preamble, fundamental rights and DPSP. They are not talking about the penal codes. They are not talking about the repressive or ideological machineries of the state. They are mainly talking about the preamble, fundamental rights and DPSP. That means our rights, our justice for us, and fraternity and welfare for us. Now, this is a question: who made the Indian state? Nationalist, liberal, and leftist historiographies tend to overlook the state building impetus of anti-caste movements. Liberal scholars such as Ramchandra Guha, Pradap Bhanu Mehta, and many of them increasingly even Marxist thinkers tend to highlight, especially in contradistinction to Modi, that Nehru was the sole progenitor of the Indian state. It's an individualized conception of state, a particular individual, a great individual building the state. Supposedly, and he was celebrated as supposedly an institution builder par excellence. And in some other accounts, there are a few more upper castes are included. That is what I call as the 1947 generation of upper caste state builders in Congress, which included Vallabhbhai Patel to V.K. Krishnan, etc. Now, on the other hand, in the nationalist imagination, India is yet to have a strong state. We don't have a strong state. It is the Hindu civilization is weakened by having a weak state. So they argue that Nehru failed to create a strong state. We are yet to create a strong state, and they are striving to create that strong state of Hindu Rashtra. And Indian leftists, whenever they talk about the state, they say that it is mainly a contribution of labor movement or parties, communist parties, party building. Now, on the other hand, the history of Dalit and lower caste political labor of state building in India is yet to be documented. So, how this one of the beginning point of this discussion is how the anti-caste movements made a clever usage of conflicting claims of British and the upper castes over civilized state capacity. Basically, the British claim, which including Mill had articulated, that Indians are not capable of having a civilized state. Especially Churchill argued that, because if you leave the Indian state to the upper castes, they will go for some sort of a savagery. They are not civilized to rule like a civilized state. So it became the burden of the upper caste leaders of the Indian freedom movement from Travancore to all other parts of the Indian state to prove that we are also civilized. We can also rule like a civilized entity. So, which was cleverly used by the anti-caste movement to actually civilize the state. So, I argue that there is a Savarna sovereignty is inherently against state sovereignty, because Savarna state, this Althusser make this distinction between repressive state apparatus and ideological state apparatus, but there is a third element which he does not talk about, or which he talks about in a dismissive way, that is the distributive state apparatus. Means the apparatus, the bureaucratic machinery of the state that carries out the welfare and the distributive functions. That is also equally important. Now, if you look at the entire strategy of the upper castes, they are always appealing to the repressive state apparatus or the ideological state apparatus. They are not appealing, but on the other hand, the lower caste movements or anti-caste movements are always appealing to this distributive state apparatus. Please care for us, take care of this, do us welfare, not only for us, for welfare for all. So, because the upper caste strategies of taming the state, keeping it subservient to the Hindu social order, and the anti-caste movement have fought for making the state stronger, especially against the Jadu Hindus' tendency for violence. So, on the other hand, this institution building claims of Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, that he individualizes the state building in India, and which at the end up portraying anti-caste movement as merely as identitarian movement detached from materialist politics. Now, on the other hand, the anti-caste movements found caste not just as an ism, but as a system that needs to be replaced with a new system based on it. That is why one of the problem with the term anti-casteism. It assumes that caste system is not the problem, casteism is the problem. But actually, the anti-caste movements recognized caste as a system. The moment something is a system, you need another system to replace it. You can't just abolish it. So the caste system has to be replaced. Now, to replace something, you need a state, which Engels also recognized. That's why they said that we can't just abolish the capitalist society. We need to first dismantle the bourgeois state and replace it with a socialist state in a transitional period of dictatorship of proletariat until the withering away of the state achieved. This idea, this is a prominent idea in state theory, which was, this idea is already present in the anti-caste movements. And now I go to the case study part. This is the region, this is the Kuttanad region, this is a map I prepared using GS, this is India, this is Kerala, and in that it is around the central Kerala. The Kuttanad is part of the central Kerala, spanning 3 districts of Kottayam, Alappuzha and Pathanamthitta. You guys know about this place through, it is famous for backwater tourism, the houseboats, etc. There is around 2 million people, with a significant SC and OBC population, Pulaya Paraya castes and Irava castes mainly. Rest are, then there are Christians, both Dalit Christians and Syrian Christians, as well as Nair and very less number of Brahmins. But once the Kutanad came under the Brahmin control by around 12th century, the Pulayas and Parayas, they were made into untouchable castes, and Iravas also were enslaved for agricultural work. Now, at the same time, one thing was the control of land was commonized by and for Brahmins and a few Nair enemies through a system of Devasam land and Brahmasam land. And these lands were exempted from emergency tax. Now, there is an argument that land property in Travancore was under the control of temples and Gyelmos. So these lands were completely free of tax, and they only had to pay some tributes in emergency situations. So this is what I call as a Savarna society. That means, the king even refuses to tax them or intervene in their affairs. Caste thrives upon Savarna society, unhindered by state over people and resources. In caste society, state has no autonomy from the Savarna elites. Therefore, it is a name state only. Now, you see, if you know about the history of Kerala, it was divided into so many small principalities. Of very late only, by end of 18th century only, by the middle of 18th century only, a strong centralized state emerged at least in the half of Kerala, which is Travancore. The other part, it was incorporated into. Now, why, there was this Kerala being a small region divided into 60 more plus small principalities, it is because of the local Savarna sovereignty. No state emerged strong enough to break this Savarna. The first state, incidentally, which tried under Martandavarma in 1729, the Travancore state was established all around by conquering many of these Vadakkampur, Tekkumpur, Purakad. These are chieftains, upper caste chieftains, small principalities, by annexing all of them. So this is the beginning of the emergence of a centralized strong state, and that is exactly the time where the caste slaves started getting little bit freedoms and rights. So what happened in one of the beginning act in Travancore, once Travancore emerged and for 100 years and it came under the dominance of the British paramountcy.
3 minutes, Dr. Mathew.
Okay, yeah. There is the castes converted themselves as demanding publics. For instance, in Malayali Memorial, 1891, the argument is that there are Paradesi Brahmins. All the jobs in Travancore, public employment, were reserved for Paradesi Brahmins. So they argued that in Malayali Memorial that this practice should stop, and all Malayalis should get the jobs. The same way, Irava Memorial, each caste demanded. Now, if you look at all these castes' demands, one important thing is that they became a demanding public in the sense that they are demanding for some share of power or resources for themselves, not particularly against any other castes or any other groups. This is a very, very important thing. So, and it became a kind of competition of demands that we need this, we need that. And this competition of demands by competing castes did not lead to violence or conflict. Rather, it converted the Travancore state into a kind of a elementary shepherd state. Means if you look at the time of independence, Travancore state itself was much ahead. Even before the communist became strong in Kerala, the Travancore state was much ahead in terms of literacy, healthcare, and many other things. That mainly happened because of the caste movements. And even now, you can see it in a different part of India, wherever the anti-caste movements are strong. I would say that the distributive state, the caring state, is stronger than the repressive state. And on the other hand, wherever the upper caste control of state is strong, where the repressive aspect of the Indian state is stronger. So their strategy was seeking the statist gaze. That is why it is an anti-Foucauldian position. The Foucault talks about evading the pastoral power here, but the lower caste communities were demanding, inviting, seducing the state to come to our affairs. Now, on the other hand, upper castes say, like, when Ramohan Roy called for the statist intervention against Sati, the upper castes campaigned against state intervention into their life. So these are some of the examples of how different communities started demanding things. You can see even just to give one small example that even they ask in legislative assembly, a lower caste member, a Irava member would ask, what is the caste composition of students in compounder course? Now you see, compounder course is not a very elite kind of a course. Then there they get a reply. So then they would say that, you see, look at our caste got less. So the argument is not against another caste. We too must be included. That is the argument. So therefore, it is by seducing the state to intervene, to provide for something, they radically changed the caste composition of the state, the very composition of the state itself. Now I go to the conclusions. I argue that state itself is a common, common property resource like water and all that. The same way, state is also a common. State is a political edifice common to all. It is a common that enables citizens to share goods of collective authority and sovereignty. Now, if you look at the birth lottery, we call it as a birth lottery, which state you are born into or which country you are born into, whether that country has a good state or not, a strong state or not, that is one of the greatest birth lottery one can have. Like, for instance, even within India, you can see that different states, depending on the state capacity, your life chances can be better or worse. And the greatest cases of human misery are where the state commons do not exist or where they are failing. For instance, now Libya is one of the society, now it's very different, or Syria, where the state capacity is less, or they have failing state. So this strong, and this state personality in India, which that we have achieved, of a caring state, there is a conundrum. I just conclude with this idea that there is a conundrum of, recently some people argue, despite being a nationalist government, how come Modi government does welfareism? I would argue that it is not because of Modi government, because still, despite being removed from power because of the defeat of Mandal politics from most states, still the Bahujan politics, the anti-caste politics control the edifice of the state machinery and compels it to be welfareist and distributive. That is why the nationalist government cannot abolish the welfare state in India, and it is still, at least remains as a caring state in many fields. That's what these people like Yamini Iyer has called it as a new welfareism of the BJP. And this, the concluding argument is that the state personality itself is shaped by the personality, the subjectivity of the group. So if the state personality is determined by the upper caste subjectivity, it is likely to be more a repressive state, which is, not item, which their own supporters famous bulldozer state. So the upper casteist conception of state is bulldozer state, and the anti-caste conception of the state is the shepherd state, the bulldozer state that it demolishes. And it comes from a politics of demanding blood. One thing, if you notice about the anti-caste movements, yes, anti-caste movements is that there are no factional killings ever happened. Unlike communist movements, where if you disagree with one party, disagree with another party, it leads to a factional killing. Now, if you look at the anti-caste movements, like BSP people will never kill Chandrasekhar Azad's followers, though they have tensions between them. Why they have tensions? Because they are demanding a politics of, there is a politics of demanding bread, and there is a politics of demanding blood. So there is a saying, a very simple saying that has some elementary truth in it. That is, a people get a king that they deserve. So if you have a subjectivity where you demand blood than bread, you get that kind of a state. Now, in the Indian state, the capacity of the Indian state to deliver bread or health or welfare in whatever capacity it remains now, I would argue it is a product of the anti-caste movement. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mathew. We will hold the questions for the final. session after everyone has spoken. So I would request the host or Shopnil perhaps to keep track of the questions that we are receiving. Thank you, Dr. Mathew, for that searching diagnosis of the Indian state. And it is time to move to our second speaker. Is Subhayu here today?
No, ma'am. He could not join due to some unavoidable engagement. So I'll be presenting the paper alone.
Right. Well, I'm very happy to introduce Ms. Pemu Sherpa, who's an assistant professor in English at Mirik College, Darjeeling. She and her colleague, Mr. Subhayu Bhattacharjee, who is also an assistant professor in the Department of English at Mirik College, are presenting a paper titled Reading EMS Namboodiripad on Caste, Problems of Theorizing Caste and Examining Populism as an Alternative Approach. So please take it away, 20 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am. Firstly, good afternoon to everyone, to respected chairperson and to my fellow presenters. I think I'm audible. Okay.
Yes.
So as the title suggests, it is a reading of EMS Namboodiripad on Caste, Problems of Theorizing Caste and Examining Populism as an Alternative Approach. So first, I would like to start or open up the conversation with V.D. Savarkar's claim that caste, while being based initially on the division of labor and displaying enough flexibility of mobility, it tends to degenerate when social stagnation emerges following the consolidation of labor roles and enterprise. Conspicuously, as a Marxist theorist, EMS Namboodiripad, the first elected chief minister of a federal communist government in India, also addresses the negative and positive facets to the subject in terms of the central question of labor, when he says that the uninterrupted repetition of social, economic, and cultural life as embodied in the nature of caste organized led to an absence of vigor and continuous change, so that when Europe began to undergo its transition from feudalism to capitalism, India, with its caste hierarchy, was unable to catch up with it. The essence of social organization based on the hierarchy of caste and subcaste is the monotonous repetition of the same job from generation to generation. So when we look into these both narratives, we see an attempt that that they are trying to place the discourse of caste within the broader ambit of their respective political aspiration. In EMS's case, we see the projection of caste onto the teleological discourse of historical materialism is quite evident. However, it is striking that it is in the very same essay that I referred to earlier that the presence of the social phenomenon of caste is held to be the root cause behind the anomalous appearance of the Indian social situation with respect to the universalizing impulse of the doctrine of historical materialism. So when he writes that in fact one of the distinguishing features of India's social organization based on the caste system was that it could easily fit itself into the three particular patterns of social organization known in Marxist terminology as primitive communism, slavery, and feudalism. The manner in which caste is superimposed on tribal society and the relation of superiority and inferiority that are established within the caste hierarchy makes it easy for this organization to serve the purpose of the division between the owner and slaves. Again, society is ripe for a transition from the slave to the feudal phase. Caste could easily be used to cover up the relationship between lord and serf. So here what we find is that EMS Namboodiripad is trying to create a sweeping generalization of the development of modern bourgeois state in India, and his argument actually suffers from several lapses and lack of attention to finer nuances and factual differences. And to give an evidence would be that in acknowledging Marx's take on the British rule in India, he writes that though the disruption, though the disruption wrought upon the three institutions, caste, village society, and joint family, the British rule emerged as the only revolution that has ever taken place in Indian history. On the other hand, as an observation concerning the status of Mahars in the 19th century and also Ambedkar's take on the caste prejudice in martial regimentation, it indicates it could also be mentioned how the formation of the British institution of the army actually reinforced and reiterated the existing caste divisions and hierarchies, so that were found at that time also, and it was equally implemented. So this lead us to reconsider and in fact revise the notion of theory, especially when it comes to the question of caste. So again, quoting Gayatri Chakrabarti Spivak in her seminal essay, Can the Subaltern Speak?, comments on critical theories' undue obligation to empirical insight. She writes, it seems, however, that the problem of the muted subject of the subaltern woman, though not solved by an essentially search for lost origins, cannot be solved by the call for more theory in Anglo-American either. That call is often given in the name of a critique of positivism, which is seen here as identical with essentialism. Yet Hegel, the modern inaugurator of the work of the negative, was not a stranger to the notion of essences. For Marx, the curious persistence of essentialism within the dialectic was a profound and productive problem. So while hinting at the possibility of the institution of caste severely threatening the continuity of interpretation along the lines of rigid European social discourse, accounting for the formation of modern bourgeois institutions, EMS's text tends to subsume factual anomalies within the umbrella of an universalizing theory. So again, I'm taking Karl Popper's opposition to Marx's analysis of history and its corresponding claims to scientific socialism on the ground that it thwarts falsification and suspension of presumed hypothesis and prophecy. Like when a particular scientific invention is done or made, it always tries to look at the falsifications. So likewise, if we try to look the same idea and see it as a manifestation in Namboodiripad Marxist analysis of caste, we find that he admits its uniqueness in the Indian social context. So it does not, the hypothesis or the prophecy does not define itself quite evidently. Another case of analytical subsumption occurs in a different context in another article by Namboodiripad, where he contends that the development of a major political parties in the post-independence Indian scene is the only serious norm, while the development of minor political entities centered on the subject of caste are anomalies which will be assimilated in the longer run. So again, here also he was not able to give a permanent address to these different anomalies that were emerging. So there is another trajectory in Namboodiripat's analysis in the article under our present consideration. That is the swift and sudden transition from the multiplicities of village society. By village society, I mean the village communities, joint families, sabhas, etc., to the uniform monolith of modern Indian society under the colonial encounter, the worker and the employer. While it is obvious that such an understating actually follows from the earlier observation of the grand narrative of class dialectics, it is also significant because of the tendency to reduce and contain multiplicities within an overarching explanatory framework. And again, this overarching explanatory framework being the master discourse of Marxism. The specters of caste seem to lie dormant in unprecedented formation of the incomprehensible future. To cite again another illustrative example, the recent spate of reservation-based demands within the sphere of corporate employment and the relaxations that had to be constitutionally provided via 69th and 78th amendments to enable social mobility within the public services are testimonies to the re-emergence of the apparently contained issue of caste, which was, supposedly told to be a contained issue. We find its re-emergence again and again. So this further brings us to another problem associated with the propensity to theorize, that is the inability to establish ways of explaining events which do not conform to the given paradigm. The turn towards critical thinking from theory is necessary by the suspension of presumption and the acknowledgement of the unique nature of social developments. In fact, it might be said that Namboodiripat's discourse on social transformation fails to be sufficient paradigm to account for the persistence of caste in multiple forms within the capitalist institution of the present condition. It is also worth asking why the deep structures of social change, including the singular component of class in such an analysis, while caste is also revealed to be a claimant to the same. Why not caste? That also question comes or arises. And caste also needs to be studied along the lines of differences of manifestation across social and historical profiles, thereby rendering it as the surplus that refuses to be accommodated within this social superstructure. Namboodiripat's analysis also suffers from the prejudice of reification. In discussing the aspects of reservation and the corresponding concepts of forward and backward communities, Namboodiripad contends that the yardstick for determining the same is the acquaintance with the modern pedagogical system. In this context, reservation functions as a tool for ensuring the holistic transformation from a semi-feudal bourgeois state to a completely modern capitalist society. The subject of reservation, or the subject of governmentality, is thus instrumental in the response to such policy measures. While this remains a major flaw of such of evaluation, another bias reflected thus is the universal bracketing of the pre-modern as the non-progressive component of social evolution stemming from a teleological theory of modernity. So the difference between the notion of critical thinking and critical theory is also evident again. So, now again, while we are discussing the findings of, let me draw your focus towards the finding of Nattur Damodaran Commission and the Kumara Pillai Commission. When these two were discussed, Namboodiripad reflects two extreme approaches, which he describes saying that caste is no more a relevant factor of modern political life and governance, and that caste-based reservation in their present form need no alteration and is most adequately represented in the present manner of their existence, which are again are wrongly proposed as the only ways forward. There can be other alternatives, and this is what the paper actually tries to deal with. So, however, unlike the firmness and certainty with which Namboodiripad approaches historical genealogy of caste as a social phenomena, the resolution that he takes via this the approach of the party of the working class to the problem lacks any determined roadmap. So we see caste from its historical genealogy, but still we do not see any map to follow to move forward. Rather, he actually vaguely proposes a resolution that seems to strike a balance of convenience. So, however, as a critical readers, we are led to ask if the first extreme observation that EMS identifies and tacitly reiterates in the conclusion is not the typical mirror image of the deterministic impulse of Marxist social epistemology, where the problems of incorporating a single determining factor of social truth are articulated in the analysis of caste. We are forced to ask if the substitution of class can be critically acknowledged. Shruti Kapila, in her recently published work, Violent Fraternity, Indian Political Thought in the Global Change, introduces us to the Freudian problem of intimacy and its relevance in the study of the history of modern Indian political thought. Namboodiripada's analysis of the gradual assimilation and elimination of caste-based political representation, as again contrary to binary political formations in the post-independence scenario, comprising the Congress as the party of the landed bourgeois, and we have the communists as the party of workers and peasants that do exist, could be read in the light of the idea of the intimate enemy, the desire to annihilate the extremely familiar, which thwarts the individuality of the subject. We are therefore led to ask if, in adopting a discourse of genealogical evolution of Indian society in its present state, Namboodiripad, as a classical Marxist theorist, makes history itself the political unconscious of his thought. This, however, does not indicate the complete abdication of temporality or the adoption of a spatial turn to say, but the sacrifice of temporal certainty at the altar of unanticipated future, wherein the latter emerges from a critical reflection of the humanist impulse of discourses like Marxism. So why I started the paper with Savarkar's ideology, and although the paper is about Namboodiripad, is the fact that all teleological ideologies, they tend to misread the subject of caste, subjecting to a particular center of interpretation in accordance with its political aspiration. Contra-teleological determinism, therefore, we could propose an understanding of the phenomena through the lens of political populism, as advocated by thinkers like Ernesto Laclau and Chantal Mouffe. So again, the later part of my title being examining populism as an examining populism as an alternative approach. Now I would like to move towards populism. So, as by these thinkers like Ernesto Laclau and Chantal Mouffe, these thinkers term populism. The populism term tends to consider radical democracy as its praxis through the resistance to the equivalence of all kinds of political oppositions. On the other hand, the use of abstract categories and complex concepts marked by differences and nuances being caste and varna, for instance, they might already, as Mouffe contends, isolate popular participation in democratic and assertive practices. Rather, following our recognition of the unanticipated dynamics of future societies, coupled with Mouffe and Laclau's assertion regarding the intellectual raw material provided by radical democratic politics, it is not a theoretical search for origin, but the diversity of caste affix in the popular domain that must be investigated. Like by not looking into the history of the things that happened, or the history of, or not going to the genealogy or origin, but looking at present, at things that matter and is arising at the moment is important, and that is what, something coming from the people, populism, the term. So given the complex dimensions of communitarian and popular identification with the question of exploitation and the relative instability of the subject of communitarian empowerment and disempowerment in modern democracies, it is through the emergence of rupture the expression, articulation of myriad forms of communitarian responses to major power centers, that the complexities of caste can best be understood and analyzed. Caste, in other words, can emerge as an appropriate subject for radical democracy only if its deterministic impulses are tethered. This could be made applicable to anti-casteist theorization across the political spectrum, including the discourse of Ambedkar or those of Thakur Panchanan Burma. The two thinkers thereby referred to actually the present and illustrative case of the differences in approaches of thinkers of anti-casteism, which often escapes the political manipulation of essentialism. Rather, the complexities of the subject in myriad presence and future generates the need for new approaches, framework, and epistemologies embodying a consistent and simultaneous corresponding correlation between praxis and thought. Thank you. That concludes my paper.
Thank you, Ms. Sherpa, for your presentation. For any questions that you may have to the floor, we will hold back these questions for later, as I said. And thank you for sticking to the time limit, Ms. Sherpa. So this allows us to move on to our next presenter, which is Ms. Sonam Gyelmo. Are you here? Yes, I can see you.
Yes, madam, I'm here.
Okay, let me just quickly introduce you. Ms. Gyelmo has been teaching for the grades ranging from 7th to 10th in Vaichur School, Bhutan. She's a proficient teacher with extensive teaching skills and obtained her bachelor's degree in education from Samse College of Education, Bhutan in 2015. After a brief year of teaching, she is currently undergoing MA in English at Yonphula Centenary College, Royal University of Bhutan. She has taught language and literature in her school, and her research interests include postcolonial studies, gender issues, and Dalit studies. Her paper today is titled Education as an Antidote to Casteism in Y.B. Satyanarayan's My Father Baliah. So, on with you, Ms. Gyelmo. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. And to take the platform, as madam has already introduced me, I'm undergoing my MA course here in Bhutan. As madam has already mentioned, I'm Sonam Gyelmo, and my presentation, it is on education as an antidote to casteism, with reference to the text that is My Father Baliah, and it is done by Satyanarayan. And I will be speaking, I will be presenting how the education has acted an antidote to casteism that has exposed in this text. So before going to the text, let me take you all through the general background of the caste system that is happening in India. As per the caste historical theory, it is saying that the caste system, it has begun in India with the arrival of Aryans, with the invasion of Aryans in around 500 BC. And another sources is taking me another thing again. And according to BBC, that the system, that caste system, it divides the Hindus into hierarchical groups that based on their work, based on their occupation, it is saying. And this practice, the practice of caste system, it has been accepted for more than 3,000 years old. And the system divides Hindus into 4 categories as Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras. And the lowest one and the final at the beneath at the Indian society is the final caste, that is scheduled caste, untouchable, or it is Dalit. And they were the Dalit untouchables. They are ostracized and snubbed off from being organized, recognized even in their sanctuaries. Because of these social norms and unchanging norms, Dalits or the untouchables, they are deprived from every aspect of life, which leads to which leads them to physically and emotionally put them in harassment. And in this way, millions of Dalit population, they are put under oppression, put under subjugation. And like any other aspects, they were not exposed to education, and education was denied to them since from 1850s. And in this decade, luckily, the British invasion has happened over India, and because of Britain, because of British, they have made some establishment in India, and that establishment from British government helped Dalit communities, which means that the Dalit improvement on Dalit communities, it is not from within, not from the Indian internal Indian government, but then that influence, their improvement is made from the outside influences I could perceive. So the caste system, it is still seen in society of India, but nonetheless, if we go back to the history, the intensity of practice, it has now improved, and it is somewhat lighter in today's society. Now coming to the text, it is an autobiographical narrative and by Satyanarayan, and in this book, he has unfolded the experience as a Dalit family into generations. And I'm going to take you all through what kind of experience based on caste they have experienced, the family of Arthur. Okay. And firstly, Arthur, he has mentioned that whatever exploitation or the humiliation they have faced, it is based on the code of the Manu. The Hindu caste people, they have put this ideology in with the codes of Manu, and as per that, they frame the practices to subjugate, to oppress Dalits. In that, they have one thing is that pollution belief. They believe that the caste people who all are in this caste category, they are pure, and the Dalit, they are impure, which means they are polluted. So with this belief, Arthur, he is describing his native place, his village in Telangana side of India, where he has mentioned that his village has got composition of Varna and Avarna. On one side, he has his village has got the caste people residing there, that is the Varna setting, and on another side he has Avarna, Dalits living on another side. So in the middle, they have maintained the boundary either by wall or it is a well-maintained space, which means that the caste people, they don't want to get polluted. There won't be any mixing, and they don't want to get mixed with Dalits. In this way, they maintain their distance. And Dalits, they do not face caste people directly, and they do not question caste people in any case. Whatever be the matter, they do not go against, they do not question them. And even if there is need of contact, like in the shop, if a customer is Dalit, the shopkeeper, before taking money from customer, he sprinkle water, believing that the water is going to eradicate the pollution. So such kind of practice was imposed on them. And next thing is that Dalits were not allowed, they were forbidden to own any kind of wealth. They were not allowed to own wealth in any form. And evidently in the text it is given that Arthur's great-grandfather, Narsia, he was a shoemaker and he presented a beautiful pair of shoes to Nazim, I think. Okay. Then in return that Nazim, he has gifted him with 50 acres of land, but Dalits, they were not given right to own things. So Dora, the local leader, is taking, he snatched away the land that is gifted by Nizam. In this way, we can see how they were deprived even from owning wealth. And another thing is lower caste or the Dalit male members, they are taken as a slave in the higher caste houses. Like Narsia, Arthur's great-grandfather's son, which means Arthur's grandfather, that is China Narsia, he is taken as a slave to work under Dora, a local leader. In return, he does not get paid, which means a total servant. And also, Dalits, they were made a mere laborer in the society. They were made to serve all kinds of caste people, and that the preference is given, their labor, their services, the preference is given for the upper caste. That in times of agricultural season, and Dalits, they work firstly for the local leaders, then other caste people, and then only after completing working under them, they get time to work for themselves. This is what happened, it is saying in the book. And also the difference they maintained in their names also, like IAH, I don't know how to pronounce this, A something, and this is the respectable word, and Gadu, it is a contemptible word as per Arthur. So if a person's name is Malia, for caste people it remains same because the suffix, it is a respectable one. But then if it has to be for Dalit, it gets changed to Gadu, like Mali Gadu. So this is how even they maintained difference in their names. And also one important thing is that they were not entertained, they were not admitted in the schools, the children of Dalits, they were not admitted in the schools. Rather, this ideology, this notion is conditioned in the Dalits' mind that if Dalits happen to have education in them, it is a sin for them. This was the oppression that paid by the caste people. So after having such oppression, subjugation on Dalits, now the second generation, like the grandfather of the author, he wanted to get out of here, and unfortunately his wife got a disease, cholera, and his wife died out of the disease. After the death of his wife, Narsia, the China Narsia, the second generation, grandfather of Arthur, he is moving into a new place. Actually, he is going to his uncle, and that uncle happened to work, he was a worker in railway. So Narsia went to his uncle, and there he could experience a different space, a new place, new space for him in the railway. The railway is established by the colonial powers. The Britain government, they have established this railway, and his uncle worked there. As he went to his uncle, he also got Narsia, the grandfather of Arthur. He got a job in the railway station, and he could experience that that new place is somewhat kind of free, but it is not totally free from caste practice. But then the intensity, if he compares the intensity from his village to the new place, intensity is heavier in the village, that was a total oppression, but then the new place, it is kind of free, but it is that new place, that new space is not totally free from the caste practice. There, what he could experience is that untouchables, Dalits, they were not allowed in the caste of, in the house of the caste people. Such kind of practices are still going on in railway spaces as well. And in that space, in that railway stations, Dalits people were expected, or they are offered to do the dirty works, and like they are given the hazardous works, like dangerous, risky works were given for them, while the Brahmins or the other kind of caste people, they were offered with better jobs, but then they were given the lowest rank jobs in the railway station. And like they were made to remove the carcass of the animals. These kind of jobs were given for Dalits. And education was, before education was not given to them at all, but later they could somewhat, their children could somewhat get into schools, but even in school they had to face the discrimination and suppression.
3 minutes, Sonam.
Yes, ma'am.
3 minutes.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, later okay, students could feel the discrimination, like they were made to sit at the corners, like the teachers, for slightest mistake, they were of intercaste marriage. And in the later generation, as mentioned in the book, mentioned in the text, in later phase of the generations, Dalit's life, that Dalit family could transform. There were some changes in their life, like that is, later they could easily get admitted to the school that is in the railway space. That is because British government, they were working for a better communication. In that way, Dalit children, they were admitted in the schools. That is the one changes thing. And in that way, Bali's 4 of Bali's sons, they could attend colleges, and they later became earner. And the other's family became an earning family. In this way, they could see that there is a social change or economic growth in their family. Like they could change the menu from chatpati to now to the having rice and vegetables in their menu. And another social change is they could overcome the hindrance of intercaste marriage. That is, Arthur himself and one of his brothers could marry women, Brahmin women, which means that is because they are highly educated. Because of their education, they could even break these norms, and they can now marry Brahmin women. And also the children of others children generations, they can travel into different countries, and they can pursue the kind of education as per their option now. So in this way, now Dalitness, that feature of Dalit, it is getting extinct, and there's no definite or there's no distinct features of Dalit, we could say. And now Arthur, before he worked as a teacher, and later he is working as a principal in one of the college. So he is holding an important designation, and in this way, now he is able to challenge back the ability of caste people, and even he can help his kind of community, that is community. He is trying to contribute some of the reforms in education sector. In this way, he can contribute, he can help his community. And if we go back and look into this Dalit family's journey, we can see that the main catalyst is education, because before the caste system practice, it was heavy, but then later they could have changed in their family. So
Right.
okay, so in this way, the education has played a great role here, and British colonial power, which was a eye opener for them, been an eye opener for them, and that because of British colonial power, they could get exposed to education, and education has helped the Dalit family. So I can conclude
Yes.
here saying that education alone could help a man to reach greater heights in life. Like Arthur himself, he was Viva Satya, which means a Dalit identity. Then he transformed into Satyanarayana, changed his name, and to Dr. Satyanarayana, which is very strong evidence to support education as an antidote to casteism.
Thank you, Ms. Gyelmo, for that paper. And I think we should move on to our final speaker of the day, who is Mr. Prateek Khobragade. A quick introduction to Mr. Khobragade, who's a research scholar, currently doing his MPhil in Law and Governance at Gyelmo. He completed his master's in Society and Culture from IIT Gandhinagar and worked as an RA and teaching associate in CEPT University and IIM Indore. His paper today is titled Exploring Egalitarian Potentials of Anticasteism, Articulating an Ambedkarite Theory of Democracy. So, Mr. Khobragade, off to you. Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
20
Thank
minutes.
You. Okay, yes. I'll be presenting the slides from the other account. So please let me know if it is visible on the screen.
Okay.
Is it?
Not yet.
I'm presenting it from the another account.
So, no, it's not yet
I've
up.
shared it. No. Let me try again. I'll try again.
You can also email it to Ishani.
Okay. Okay, I'll do that.
Yes, you can send it to me. I'll share it.
Yeah, why don't you email it to Ishani and then start reading your paper and she can open it slowly. Otherwise, we
Okay.
will lose time.
Okay. Can you please tell me the email ID or share it?
It's in the chat box.
Is it in message? I
Yeah,
cannot
it's
see it.
oishani.aishani.anticasteism@gmail.com.
Okay. I'm sorry for that.
No, it happens. Technical glitches are always par for the course. But please begin and then Oishani will open it
shared
and
it.
upload it.
Yeah, with Ishani.
Okay.
So, Jai Bhim to all. Firstly, I should express my sincere thanks to the organizers for organizing this conference on theorizing anti-casteism that gave us scholars this opportunity to present our work and connect with the academic community in this area. It has been a great learning experience, and I hope to learn more from the field academics from the chair, Professor Anupama, Mohan, and fellow panelists. The title of my paper, as you can is Exploring Egalitarian Potential about the potential intervention of Ambedkarite thought in the contemporary theories of democracy, where I see Ambedkarism as a radical brand of anti-casteism, which I argue is essentially an egalitarian ideology. Let me then read the abstract for you all. Just a minute.
No, please don't read the abstract, Prateek. Please start with your paper.
Okay. Okay. The paper
PowerPoint
seeks
is up.
to underscore Ambedkarism as the paper seeks to underscore Ambedkarism as an organic and pragmatic egalitarian ideology that needs to be systematically articulated to propound an Ambedkarite theory of democracy. Such an articulation, I argue, will further the cause of egalitarianism by contributing to the global discourses on democracy for an all-encompassing emancipation of the oppressed in other societies of the world as much as in the Indian society. Propagation of Ambedkarism, the paper ultimately holds, is important for the cause of emancipation of the oppressed and the establishment of an egalitarian world order. In order to discuss these ideas, it is imperative to delve into the terminology of the key ideas that are interconnected.
This is not the thing.
Oishani, please mute yourself.
Please, Dara.
Oishani, can you mute yourself so that our speaker can speak?
I'll continue.
Sorry, Prateek. Just wait a bit.
Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
The pervasive phenomenon of caste in South Asia, despite its evolution and persistence, has historically been countered and resisted by movements that have sought to endorse egalitarian ideals. These movements, collectively termed as anti-caste movements, can be characterized by their revolutionary zeal to dismantle the Brahminical order of Hindu religion, particularly the caste-ardent socio-political hierarchy, untouchability, and patriarchal legacies derived from the caste system. One of the most epoch-making modern political articulation of this nature came with the work and movement of B.R. Ambedkar, who analyzed and theorized the caste system, simultaneously espousing the political project of annihilation of caste, with a pronounced transition in Indian politics and society post the fall of the Berlin Wall, subsequent economic reforms and socio-political movements, particularly the Mandal movement and the emergence of Bahujan movement. While there came an undeniable shift in Indian politics from center-left hegemony to right-wing hegemony, there also comes the emergence of an autonomous Ambedkarite public informed with the anti-caste consciousness that continues the legacy of Ambedkar decades after his demise. So with bourgeoising Ambedkarite discourses in India and across the world, Ambedkar is now increasingly recognized as a global thinker of some of the most universal ideas such as equality, democracy, minority rights, representation, and so on. Recent scholarship have renewed academic interest in Ambedkar's original axiomatic thought and praxis. A systematic theorization of Ambedkar's ideology or Ambedkarism, however, is yet impending. The scope of this project, although huge, the paper seeks to outline the contours of such a project of defining Ambedkarism in relation to theorizing anti-casteism in the contemporary context of dynamic socio-political changes in South Asia. In defining and theorizing Ambedkarism, the paper seeks to underscore the egalitarian potentials of anti-casteism and Ambedkarism's radical commitment towards republican constitutionalism, liberty, equality, fraternity, public education, minority rights, and the conceptual category and politics of representation. The paper ultimately seeks to explore the potentials of espousing an Ambedkarite theory of democracy, contributing to the contemporary debates on theories of democracy, particularly the agonistic and radical theories of democracy that have destigmatized identity politics from liberal hegemony by re-establishing it as a fundamentally a compossibility of representation politics. Drawing from foundational articulations of anti-caste consciousness, the paper employs critical analysis and discourse analysis to propound a robust and consistent theory of Ambedkarism that would inform the contemporary scholarship on caste and anti-casteism as well as global scholarship on egalitarianism emancipatory politics, and democracy. So, in order to discuss these ideas, I I seek delve into the terminology of some key ideas that are interconnected and in a sense dialectical. I proceed with the most comprehensive articulation of caste uh, in the writings of B.R. Ambedkar. Ambedkar, in his maiden work, which happens to be in an anthropological seminar, is a systematic inquiry into the genesis, mechanism, and development of the institution of caste. In this 1916 paper, Ambedkar proceeds in a layered analysis of caste as the following. Caste in India means an artificial chopping of the population into fixed and definite units, one prevented from fusing into another through the custom of endogamy. He further explains the superimposition of endogamy on exogamy means the creation of caste. So for caste to exist, uh, maintaining the endogamy remains most crucial. This can be achieved only by maintaining the numerical disparity between the two sexes in that caste. He therefore goes on to explain the four means by which numerical disparity between the two sexes is conveniently maintained, which are burning the widow with her deceased husband, compulsory widowhood, a milder form of burning, he says, imposing celibacy over the widower, wedding him to a girl who's not of marriageable age. Therefore, sati enforced widowhood and girl marriage, the Hindu customs that were primarily intended to solve problems of the surplus man and surplus woman in a caste and to maintain its endogamy. Ambedkar finally describes caste as an enclosed class which has lost the open door character because of the Brahman caste closing its door to others and non-Brahman caste imitating the same. In his much celebrated undelivered lecture Annihilation of Caste, Ambedkar further elaborates the caste system is not merely a division of laborers, which is quite different from division of labor. It is a hierarchy in which the division of laborers are graded one above the one above the other. What is more crucial to this analysis is below. Uh, the caste system has two aspects. One of its aspect, it divides men into separate communities. In its second aspect, it places these communities in a graded order one above the other uh, in social status. Caste therefore forms a graded system of sovereignties, high and low, which are jealous of their status and which know that if a general dissolution came, some of them stand to lose more of their prestige and power than others do. With this basic understanding of the institution of caste, it becomes very clear what casteism entails. Casteism, therefore, can be defined as an individual or collective action or a structural process that serves to uphold and reinforce the institution of caste with not only its enclosed nature but also its graded inequality with the Brahmin caste at the helm of it. Anticasteism, therefore, can be theorized in relation to the above as any individual or collective action or a counter-hegemonic tradition that seeks to dismantle and annihilate the institution of caste and the Brahminical supremacy that shields this institution. Since casteism ultimately boils down to reinforcing of graded inequality, destroying this inequality, or in other words, establishing equality, becomes a central tenet of anticasteism. It is therefore imperative to look at anticasteism as an egalitarian ideology. Egalitarian doctrines tend to rest on a background idea that all human persons are equal in fundamental worth or moral status. People should be treated as equals, should treat one another as equals, should relate as equals, or enjoy an equality of social status and of some sort. The earliest articulation of egalitarian ideas in the context of Indian society can be traced back to Ambedkar's major influence and as described by Kancha Ilaiah as primarily a political philosopher, the Buddha. For Ilaiah, the Buddha is a social thinker who is rational and dialectical in his approach than idealistic. William Long, in his recent article, recent paper, demonstrates the parallels between Buddha's political thinking and Western liberal democratic thought with Buddha's emphasis on equal rights, protection against tyranny via equality before the law, and participatory and deliberative governance. For Ambedkar, propagation of Buddha's Dhamma, an egalitarian religion, as an antidote to Vedic religion or Brahmanism is nothing less than a revolution. The Brahminical retaliation to spread of Buddhism is seen by Ambedkar as a counter-revolution. For Ambedkar, the history of India is nothing but a mortal combat between Buddhism and Brahmanism. In other words, this is but a dialectical history of conflict of the two conflicting ideologies, namely the Brahminical supremacist ideology of casteism and the egalitarian ideology of anticasteism. Gyelmo traces a history of revolutionary anti-caste traditions from ancient era to medieval and to modern era in Dalit visions. While Ambedkar demonstrates how the Bhakti movement was essentially a cult of Buddhism with a major participation from the non-Brahmin lower caste, she emphasizes Ambedkar's intervention in the anti-caste tradition from the 1920s onwards as a more pronounced and rigorous attack on casteism. Ambedkar thus eventually has come to be the pivotal icon of anti-casteist movements in the post-colonial and contemporary times. Ambedkar's axiomatic thought and political praxis or pragmatic politics for the upliftment of those oppressed by the caste system by historically winning for them legal rights, upholding their political equality and dignity, marks as a distinguished and radical brand of emancipatory politics. It is therefore in the interest of the normative scholarship on emancipatory politics, an egalitarian political project, to systematically interpret and articulate ideology of Ambedkar. This task, I argue, would entail a critical analysis of two bodies of work. One is that of B.R. Ambedkar himself through his writing and speeches and his political work. The second is that of the Ambedkarites or the disciples or followers of Ambedkar that include the Ambedarite leadership and the larger Ambedkarite public. By a careful systematic analysis of both these sources, the basic tenets or principles of Ambedkarism can be derived. My preliminary research that includes critical reading of and writing of Ambedkar, literature review or of the thought on the thought of Ambedkar and his movement, and also qualitative surveys and interviews with prominent Ambedkarite leaders as well as Ambedkarite masses, suggest the following principles as core principles of Ambedkarism: egalitarianism, social democracy, republican constitutionalism, constitutional reform for political representation of the oppressed minorities, and public education for substantive democracy. These identified principles are subjective and the list is not exhaustive. An elaboration of these categories is beyond the scope of this paper. However, here it may suffice to underscore these principles as the contours on which a systematic theory of Ambedkarism can be developed. The theory thus developed would essentially turn out to be a theory of democracy that would inevitably intervene in and converse with the contemporary theories of democracy. The scholars of Ambedkar's thought, theorists of democracy, and anthropologists of anti-caste movement should collectively endeavor in this task to formulate an organic and systematic Ambedkarite theory of democracy that may further the good old cause of emancipation and egalitarianism. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khobragade, for that very searching paper, but also for sticking way under the time limit, enabling all of us to actually have some time for Q&A. First, I will request Oishani to turn off the PowerPoint. And I will request my panelists to kindly come online on camera, if you all can.
Yes, I am here.
It might slow down some of our combined bandwidth, but let's see. Let's play it by ear. And so we have the floor open for questions. I think there is already one question, and I have a bunch of thoughts as well. So we'll take Debadrita's question. Debadrita, are you still around? Yes, I think.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So would you like to read your own question to Dr. Mathew?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. So, Dr. Mathew, firstly, thank you for that wonderful presentation. It was very enriching. So, my question is that would you please elaborate on why caste hierarchy is not a system, especially since it does perpetuate systematic categorization and disenfranchisement of some individuals from their basic fundamental rights simply by the quote-unquote birth lottery since ages. And now, even if caste system were to be abolished, there would not be a vacuum, right? Like there would be another social system which would take its place. So, why would it not be a system? Could you please explain that? Thank you.
To clarify, I did not say that caste is not a system. I was saying that casteism, the term casteism is slightly problematic in the sense, it makes you feel that, it makes one feel that it is just a ism, it's just an ideology or just a behavioral thing. It's not a system. So in fact, I would say that caste, obviously caste is a system. The caste system and caste hierarchy is an aspect of the system. It's a central defining aspect of the system, graded hierarchy. Now, to the point, I would insist that, caste system, since any system, any social, anthropological, sociological system, it cannot be just abolished. What it can be done is, it has to be replaced with another system. This is, one fundamental thing a lot of leftist and liberal scholars do not understand. For instance, just to give a very plain, simple example, that much of these marriages that happen in India are caste marriages. I say that it's caste mating. We have only caste mates, right? Now, this is just cannot be abolished as it is, because we need to have a different system of marriages in India. So this is now. Imagine take the case of to abolish caste. As I said, caste can't be abolished, but it can be replaced. Now the question comes that what it has to be replaced with. This is where the real question comes. This is even unlike leftists and liberals, even a BJP Ramadhav, one of the BJP secretaries. No, he's not a BJP intellectual. He argued this thing exactly. Caste is an anthropological system. It has to be replaced. Now, their idea is that caste can be replaced with a non-hierarchical caste system. That is what exactly the Brahma Samaj, all these people are. So, like I have written in my paper, there are always these 5 tendencies. Somebody thinks that, okay, caste can be replaced by class, converting caste into class. That is what communist movements attempted in Kerala or elsewhere. Then Narayana Guru, if you look at the strategy of SNDP, Sri Narayana Dharma, the caste, they wanted to become a religion from Irava community to Irava Dharma, the Sri Narayana. Now Sikhism successfully they became, from a particular caste, they became a successful religion. And another strategy is, to cast it to community, just, community formation. If you look at the beginning of Kerala modernity, Kerala Renaissance, it is to make a caste into community. Then, as I said, if you look at Bengal Renaissance and Yoga Shema Safai, etc., they try to convert caste into humans. That means you remove the caste part and make them humans. To make Brahmins, basically it was upper caste movement. So, but that rather than abolishing the caste system, it only produces people who claim to be casteless. That is why a lot of Nayars and a lot of Padilog in Bengal claim to be casteless. So they thought that what they strived, they think, if you try something, many people misunderstand that they succeeded in it. Yeah, they tried, good luck, but of course they did not succeed. So then another tendency is, one of the but really standing tendency that I argued, which is persisting, is, simply caste is remaining as caste. That is what I said in the case of, that was acceptable in colonial Travancore. That we are a caste and we will articulate our demands, we will fight for our rights as caste. So, rather than, immediately, now you see, anybody who talks about caste first start with the idea that it has to be annihilated. Wait, take a pause. first, recognize what are the castes. And these people, many of these anti-castes people do not know even what are the main castes. I always start my classes with a simple question. Tell me 5 castes in your region. And a lot of people who write theories, who speak about anti-casteism, they do not know, But that was exactly the Travancore, each caste, they demanded things, they articulated things, they said, we are this caste, this is our number, this is our population, we deserve this much share of power, we deserve this thing. Or, in the particular hostel, in a school hostel, our numbers are less. We are 2.5%. We deserve to get 2.5%. That is not their field. That is where I said. So they are demanding for themselves. They are not demanding anything against anybody else.
Right.
That's what precisely
that distinction is important. Yes.
Yeah. That's what precisely make anti-caste politics non-violent. You are competing, that is for sure. Competing for resources, competing for power, but not at the expense of others. That is why they have to create a better, more caring, a shepherdistic state. So therefore, anti-caste movements, wherever it gets root, they create this distributive state apparatus as against the
repressive or ideological
and repressive state apparatus. On the other hand, Yogi's bulldozer state, it gives you demolition.
Right.
And that is what they demand also.
Okay. We can come back to this question because I think it circulates around certain key nodes of your work also, Dr. Mathew. And maybe we can take Aditi Priya's question, which has come from YouTube, which is, in what ways have other anti-caste leaders between Buddha and Baba Saheb entered the discussion? And she puts this question to Prateek. Prateek, will you take it? Oh, I think is his camera, is his connection frozen?
His connection is frozen.
We can't hear you, Prateek. Now I think it's moving. You can turn off your camera, Prateek, if you like. Maybe that will help.
To respond to that question, I think because of the paucity of time, I would. Okay. So, in what ways other anti-caste leaders between Buddha and Baba Saheb enter this discussion? So, this has been discussed by Gyelmo in her book.
Hi, can others hear Prateek? I can't hear him.
No, ma'am. I think his network is not.
Yeah, his network is not cooperating. Maybe we will let him come back and he can take up the question. Okay, he's disconnected. He'll probably come back. I can ask a kind of comment to this. This would have been to both Dr. Mathew and to Prateek, and maybe even to Pemu and Sonam. Pemu, are you here? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Sonam is here? No. Okay, I can't see her. Basically, perhaps I'm playing the devil's advocate here, but I wondered if, because anti-caste movements have tended in India to have a variegated history, a heterogeneous history, often coming out of very local affairs, that we run the risk always of finding a totalizing grand narrative, or one that is as totalizing as, say, Marxism, or liberationism of any variety. And I was wondering that, to my mind, it seemed that there is a very definite need to separate the praxis of anti-caste movements, which have been variegated, diverse, heterogeneous, therefore impelled by many kinds of impulses, motivations, and goals, and have been teleological in a certain way, and therefore have been successful and not so successful. So that, it is possible for us to take these historical positions, as Dr. Mathew did, to say that something has been successful or something has not been successful, or something has been partially successful. This often emerges from our ability to look at events historically and materially. And then a second level that really is perhaps the creation or the formulation, articulation of a coherent, if not totalizing, but certainly a coherent discourse, and that this is a kind of anti-caste discourse. And perhaps this kind of a structural, no doubt there will be continuities, but there will also be very crucial distinctions to my mind. And I wondered if, it was possible to meaningfully use, and whether you've had an opportunity to meaningfully assess the value of having an understanding of anti-casteism or anti-caste movements as actually divided historically, materially, between a discourse, a theorizing, as well as a praxis, so that you can honor and perhaps sort of historically understand the diversity and heterogeneity even within anti-caste movements, without running the risk of essentializing them. So the question is really just a way to think about it, and I was, any one of you who presented could take it up.
Prateek, if he wants to talk, or otherwise I will just say a few things. Yeah, it's a very nice comment. Actually, you see, if we just from Travancore, if we travel just 50 kilometers and reach Malabar, which has a completely different history in terms of both in terms of caste and in terms of the political regimes, because Travancore is a princely state and Malabar is part of the British Empire, which is directly under the. So for every region, because of this distinction between princely states, different kind of regimes, etc., every region in India has a lot of this variegated history. But at the same thing, one thing, see what is so common about Indian civilization, that is caste. From Kanyakumari to caste, one binding thread of the Indian civilization is that caste. I don't think anything else, which our civilization could develop in common, right? The second thing is Indian Constitution, 2 C words. But that's a modern thing. Now, this common caste system, like, when we talk about capitalism, always Marxists know that there are capitalisms. Capitalisms are different. Peripheral capitalism, metropolitan capitalism. But on the other hand, when we talk about caste system, we say that 5,000 years of caste in India, caste system in India. Before 12th century, there was no caste in Kutanad. Between 8th to 12th century, only it developed. So even now, there are areas in India where caste system has not developed, because it is a system. It has to evolve, it has to develop. Their agents have to come, they have to, or even the peripheries of Northeast, still the caste system has not developed. Even when I was going through this archival things on Kutanad, etc., even to very recently, like in even 1850s, just outside of Kutanad, the more you go to the hill regions, caste was not there exactly, especially in tribal areas. Now, we have many anthropological works, which talks about how Hindutva movement penetrates the Adivasi areas, both in central India, in Dandakaranya, etc., and also in the northeast, where they, recruit some of the priestly groups among the Adivasis as Adivasi Brahmins. So where they don't have a caste system, it is being created, nurtured. So that means the same way. What I'm trying to say is that we have variegated capitalism, we have variegated caste also. And in these places where we have a deformed caste system, in the sense of not having a proper caste system of Brahmins, Vaishya. Like in Kerala is a good example where we don't have a proper defined. So if you ask, one question about what is actually the caste of, see, everybody says, for instance, Syrian Christians are Savarna. Now, always I ask this question: tell me what is exactly is the caste of Syrian caste? Yeah, they claim to be Brahmin, and at least some of them claim to be Brahmins, but that doesn't make them Brahmins, obviously. And most of the castes in India who claim to be Brahmins are not actually Brahmins. A friend of mine very forcibly argues that a caste group that claims that they are Brahmins itself is a proof that they are not Brahmins. Because Brahmins just say they are Brahmins. Now somebody else like Vishwakarmas in Kerala also claim that they are Brahmins. That also means they are not Brahmins. So now we exactly ask, pinpoint to a person. Somebody is a caste analyst. And we ask this question: what is exactly the caste of a Syrian Christian? What is exactly a caste of a particular Assamese group in Assam? We can't say, because the caste system is not developed in the way it developed exactly in the Gangetic plains. These are deformed caste systems. So when the fight against the caste system, whatever strategies we want, which has to understand this variegated nature of caste system itself. Not just the other heterogeneities in terms of religious, ecological, or political systems. Okay, that histories are also very different, but we have variegated caste systems as well.
Right, and that was my concern here. And we have Prateek.
That's an excellent point, Prateek.
Thank you. Since we have Prateek, I don't want to let Aditi's question go. Prateek, can you respond to Aditi, please? We'll take some time.
Yes, ma'am, I'll respond. Gail Omved in her work discusses the Bhakti movement as a cult of Buddhism. So we have saints who largely fall in this anti-caste tradition, from Guru Ravidas, Kabir, and Ayankali, and to other people, even in the colonial era, from Savitribai Phule, Jyotiba Phule, to Periyar, and others. So these are a range of icons that the anti-caste movement owes to. I'll just say that for now. I'll also like to add to this ongoing discussion about the question that ma'am raised, and to which Mathew sir responded. I totally agree with both of their points, that calling these long tradition making a sweeping statement, we certainly do run the risk of totalizing. But that is a fundamental contradiction of theory making, isn't it? Because can there be a phenomenon or a category that we can theorize without identifying minimum denominator and making a statement about it? So I totally understand ma'am's concern that with the totalizing statement, it runs the risk of homogenizing and in a sense invisibilizing or not acknowledging the variety or the diversity in the movements or in that phenomena. But I also like to mention a flip side of it, that when such a thing happens, it leads to it also leads in a way to dilution of that subject. Because when you say that, when it is said that the anti-caste movement is heterogeneous, or that indeed is a fact, but it also leads to localizing of that factor, or not treating it as a urgent subject, or a subject of national or international problems. So we recently had this example of in which Google comes out to be extremely casteist. So this indeed is a global phenomena. So hence I think such rhetorical statements also. I understand the duty of scholarship to be objective, and this the necessity to be value neutral, but isn't all scholarship political in a sense? So that is why
Right.
I
Right, and
I
I guess the point, I was trying to indicate is that not that scholarship can be objective or value neutral, which I think these are the chimeras of our work. These are illusory; they don't exist, right? Because we are always subjective states of being that have to take on what Amartya Sen powerfully called positional objectivity. But at the same time, I think I'm completely in agreement with Prateek that there is the risk of totalization is not the risk of any kind of totalization, but it is the risk of ahistoricism, the tendency to see all variegated phenomena as participating in an empty homogeneous time, as Benjamin would put it. So all theorizations can be meta without necessarily being ahistorical. And I think Dr. Mathew's work, and in fact your own reading of Ambedkarism, as far as I can see, because it was only in some ways a prolegomena for the actual work you'll be doing, it indicates to me that there is still a powerful draw on the ism and ismatic versions to unite, to create solidarities, collectivities, without effacing local histories of resistance. And the revival or the continued to continually allow local histories and history in general is H small, is to be aware that we don't run the risk of isms that invisibilize, or as you said, peripheralize, and so on and so forth. So my reading of all 4 papers in some ways was tied to the fact that it is important to recognize that the necessary contradictions or paradoxes, if you will, between discourse and praxis are part and parcel of any movement of reparative justice, and that they don't neutralize each other. Especially, I think, with Pemu and Subhayu's paper on EMS is a perfect example of that, because there is a distinction to be recognized between EMS's work as a historian, as a Marxist historian, and as a politician. And that work is being continuously done in the light of historical knowledge. It cannot simply be done from a value neutral space, as it were, but it has to be done through a historical space of the then and here, there and now, and so on and so forth. But I think we have run out of time of what has been a very thought-provoking panel with 4 wide-ranging papers that have been brought together under the aegis of Theorizing Anticasteism. And I thank all my 4 panelists for their very searching, probing papers. Certainly a lot to think about. And I thank my students and some non-students that I can also see who participated in the discussion. So thank you, everyone, and I wish you a wonderful rest of the conference. Thank you also to Oishani and Swapnil for hosting and assisting. So with that, thanks, everyone.
Thank you to you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Very nice.
thanks a lot, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.